I've gotten accustomed to hearing. A wild soul sanctuary. Never heard that anywhere else. And I know a couple of you are going, really? I have a story I'm going to share with you. It has nothing to do with what I was going to talk about, but I think it'll be interesting. I've been working with this marvelous woman who is a retired ultrasound therapist, you know those folks, and she had her own business and she traveled all over the country, spending months here and months there and months there, and her favorite months were up in the far north of Canada, not even in Alaska, but in northern Canada. And she got to know the locals, and she built this marvelous relationship with the land. And she loves to snowshoe and sled and all those good things. So it really worked for her. And at one point, she decided, I need some time off. So she went and she rented a mule and a horse and took off by herself into the woods. And she was sitting at the campfire, and the horses were going, there was something wrong. And she's looking around and she sees the glowing eyes on the edge of the circle. And she blesses them. Thank you. You can stay there. We will stay here. All is well. And then the next morning, they're still there. And they're just sitting there and they're looking at her. And they call and they sit there. And then one of them gets up and kind of comes toward her and goes away. And toward her and goes away. And she finally figures out that they want her to follow them. So she does. And they took her to their den where their pups were. And she spent 3 days in that den with those wolves. Now that's a wild soul. High point of her life, I think. Completely reshaped her whole life. Yeah? Whew. 3 days in the wolf's den. 3 days in a cave. 3 days of the long, dark night of the soul. Those 3 days are very, very important parts of our spiritual journey, whatever they were for us. For her, clearly. For the man that we know as Jesus Christ, it was the time that he honored a 1,000-year-old tradition at that time of the anointed one being publicly executed, put into a rock cave tomb, and on the third day, having the priestess who anointed him find him at that cave, or not. That had been around for a very long time. If anyone in Jerusalem at that time had been a Babylonian by tradition, they would have said, oh yeah, this is normal. It was the defining moment of one's anointing. And there was a standard process that went with it, and part of the reason that the biblical story is that Jesus rode into town on a donkey was part of that story, and part of the reason that Jesus went into the temple and just threw all the tables over and got everyone really angry at him was to make this all happen. In that tradition, there would be this public execution of this person that is somehow not okay, even though he'd been anointed the King of Kings and Lord of Lords for all time ever. This happened every 7 to 9 years, depending on how long it took Venus to complete her flower of life transits across the sun. This was normal. And when that was complete, the execution and the opening of the tomb 3 days later would happen. Marduk and Tammuz are some of the names associated with that tradition. The earliest one I can find of that is 3500 BC. So as we go through this historical and consistent pattern, we find there has to be a high priestess anointing him. Well, we know in the gospel stories that someone showed up with the alabaster jar and anointed this man. And there's various versions of that, but most of us think it was the Magdalene, who is always portrayed with an alabaster jar and is always portrayed taller than all the other people, which means she was a very important person. And it had to happen at the time of the spring equinox. And it also had to happen when there was a known eclipse of the sun. The Babylonians knew these things. The Romans, not so much. And so it was all very carefully orchestrated. And what we call the last Thursday, or the Last Supper, on Thursday night, Maundy Thursday, for those of you who are in the more high church traditions, Maundy Thursday, Last Supper, was the Passover feast. And the Passover feast, if anyone has been through it, has this marvelous, marvelous process that you go through. And one of the sets of words in the Passover feast, in what's called the Haggadah, and for those of you who are in the room who are in that tradition, Acharon Shel Pesach. Yes, today is the last day of Passover. At that time, the night before the solar eclipse, they had a Passover feast. And as I said, the Haggadah, that is the description of all the things you have to do on Passover, includes the lines, "Do this in remembrance of me," holding and blessing the wine and the bread. It also includes all of the words that are in the standard blessing of the bread and wine, we'll just say that, in the Catholic tradition. So I grew up in the Protestant world, but my aunt decided that her experience of Christianity involved so much hypocritical stuff that when she married the son of a rabbi, she would convert. So my aunt and uncle's family were Jewish. And that was where I spent my college years, and I got to take care of the kids. And Friday night, every Friday, we had Shabbat. And it was marvelous, and I heard the Hebrew, and it was beautiful. And then one time they actually had an English version of the Hebrew. And I went, ooh, this is interesting. And I took it home and I began to look at it. Well, then after a few weeks, I had a new roommate in college, and she was Catholic. And there was a Catholic center on campus. Many of you know about Newman Centers. And I escorted my new roommate to this place because she'd never seen there, never been there. And it was not long into the English version of the Mass. And the priest got up and said exactly the same words I just said on Friday night at Shabbat. Oh my, isn't that interesting? And that was for me the deciding moment for an interfaith life. And then I went on into anthropology and studied the religious traditions of about 36 other cultures. And that was when I decided that even though my scientist training and self was going, I can't see how there could possibly be a God, everybody else on the planet thinks so. I think I'll take it as a working hypothesis. All of which is to say, it's all one. Yes? It's all one. Whether we find our spiritual connection in the natural world or in this marvelous combination of words and music that happen in a space like this, or whether we find it alone under a tree, or whether we find it, driving in our cars through the most beautiful country in the world, right? Some of this that I get to drive through is just like, thank you, thank you, thank you. Whether we find that connection through the kinds of things that go on in the Maori tradition or in the Hawaiian tradition or in the Sonoy tradition or it doesn't matter. It's all one. which I love about what you opened with this morning. Thank you, Kevin. I also need to tell you that today is the third Sunday in April. That makes it Go Fly a Kite Day. There's a kite contest happening in Lincoln City if you want to get over there. So when we know that it's all one, we don't have to get, he didn't do it right? We don't have to get to those boundaries and those walls and those triggers that say, oh, it has to be this way. We can be open to discovering what might possibly be, as she chose that wonderful word, portal. What is my portal here, right? Yeah. For what it's worth, my publishing company is called Portal Center Press. And when we're being willing to see the possibility of a portal here, then we can go back into whatever our previous experience was, if we are somehow recovering from some church or temple experience, and look at all of it in a new way. Which is why I told you the Babylonian version of the resurrection story first. Yeah? Now, those of you who study the Course in Miracles are aware that the voice that calls himself Jesus, the Christ who dictated the Course in Miracles, said, I am not separate from you. I am not someone to be worshipped. I'm your older brother. I just went there first. Isn't that interesting? It's very clear in the Course in Miracles that there is no one person that is the offspring of the divine or Son of God, but that all beingness is the offspring of the source of all that is. All beingness, including microphones. Including whatever else it is that we are looking at. All beings, all beingness is that oneness expressing in wonderful ways. And those of you who've been in my class are aware that, if this, for some reason, happened to be the source of all that is, I'm out here, one of the cells on the fingertips. The same stuff, totally interconnected, right? Totally part of, with all the same qualities as the source and supplier and nurturer of all that is, that in the gospel, Jesus called Abba, which means daddy. The infinite source of all that is daddy. Woo. And so if I know that, then I go back to the story of Easter morning. The Magdalene goes to where the tomb is, and she is prepared, if necessary, to finish the anointing of the body for the wrapping up for the final burial of that body. That was a temporary placement of that body. And she goes and she finds that the huge stone that had been rolled in front of this tomb has been rolled away. And the centurions that were posted there to make sure that this dangerous man was not in any way taken away are gone. And it's not quite dawn. She's technically not supposed to be there because she's supposed to be still honoring Shabbat until dawn, but that's another story. So she's there in that twilight. You know that time when you can sort of see things, either before the sun has come up or after the sun has set, but it's all kind of misty and gray and it isn't quite clear. That was when she was there. And she became aware that there was a figure in the garden. But her first reaction before she became aware of that was, where have they taken my Lord? Well, that's a formula. That's exactly what had been said for 3,000 years before that. Where have they taken my Lord? That means that was the formula for, oh my goodness, it worked. all their careful planning to make sure that he was publicly executed at the point of the solar eclipse so the sky would be black when he gave up his spirit. And there would be an earthquake, because there's almost always an earthquake around the equator when there is a solar eclipse at the equator. It all came together. And rather than hanging on a cross for 24 hours, which would be normal in the Roman culture, he was there for about 3. Total of 6 from the time Pontius let him go to the time that he said, "It is finished." Now, we can get into some fun stuff about why and how he knew how to do that. But what the Course in Miracles and many other channeled sources are telling us is that he was doing that to show us that we are free, not to do something for us that we can't do for ourselves. So the way that he understood, according to these channeled works that are coming out today, what he was doing was that by demonstrating that it is possible to overcome even a very public, very painful execution, we could be freed from our belief that we could be punished, that we could be in pain, and that we could die. Wow. And that is what unitics get to celebrate. That's unity heretics. I love to do a class I call Ruth's Heretical Look at the Bible. But that's really what we are celebrating. This guy showed us that when we know there is no separation between us and the source and nurturer and sustainer of all beingness, we are free. Emily Cady, one of the teachers of Unity, the first teacher of Unity materials, she created Lessons in Truth. She was a holistic physician in New York City, and she discovered that when she knew there was no separation between her and the divine, her patients got well and she didn't have to do anything. When she knew there was no separation between herself and the divine, and she also knew there was no separation between her father, who happened to be being imprisoned in a Spanish prison during the Spanish Civil War. No, it's not happening. I guess it's happening. On mute. It was on mute. So when she knew that not only was she in no way separated from the divine, and that her father was in no way separated from the divine, after over a year of having ambassadors and senators and all these people do what they could, and nothing had happened to her father, the Spanish prisoner, 3 months later, he was in New York with her. It took 3 weeks of her being in that space, not doing, but being. And that's the freedom. There is nothing. And in fact, one of the people who taught the Fillmores, who created Unity, Emma Hopkins used to say, the power to know that there is nothing to do is the greatest power you can possibly experience. Woo! The power is in the being and the knowing. So what did the Babylonians do? That they were able to have guys publicly executed, put in a tomb, and have the high priestess come and say, he's gone, and have him walk around on the planet afterwards. They knew the same thing. It has nothing to do with the culture in which we are raised. It is the same understanding. When a shaman in any indigenous culture is able to facilitate the restoration of harmony in the community, in the ecosystem, and in the individual, it's because they know and they feel and they claim from that place the truth of harmony. The truth of well-being. As some of you are attending a little Thursday night Zoom that I'm doing on prayer, all the different ways that New Thought teachers have taught us how to get to that space and what to do in that space, which is not doing it, simply being. But we don't have a word for that thing where I'm being and something's happening. And in this 5:30 on Thursday night's class, we've talked about the nature of what we call prayer. And almost all of us have some prayer we know how to recite in some language or other, yes? Might be Sanskrit, might be Hebrew, might be English, might be Latin. Ave Maria. And those words are not the prayer. That's the thing that someone lost along the way. So when I was in college having Shabbat with my Jewish family and then going to Mass on Sunday with my Catholic roommate, I had to get past the words. Because clearly what the Catholics were saying was happening and what my Jewish family was saying were happening were very different, but they were using the same formula to get to a place, and it was the place that is important, not the formula, right? And in fact, some people call the Lord's Prayer the great formula. Yeah. What it is a summary of the regular Jewish morning, afternoon, and evening prayer. But it is the great formula. That is, you repeat it over and over again, and you get to that state. In fact, Emma Hopkins, the Fillmore's teacher, used to say on her 4th lesson, repeat the Lord's Prayer 15 times every Thursday morning, so that when a person comes to you for the 3rd or 4th time, you're going to be in a place where you know the truth, and there is no question. And they walk away healed. Because if you repeat a known formula, whatever formula it is, I don't care what the language is, I don't care what the process is. It might be ringing these beautiful bowls. It might be playing the flute. It might be repeating words. The smells, the bells, the words of all the traditions are simply to get us to that place of knowing. And truth is what we need to know, yes? Truth, the beingness, the love, the everlasting, eternal love that is all that is, has to be all we see. Now, when Kevin and Claire and I were talking about last night, they asked me a little bit about how I got to this understanding. And one of the pieces that has helped me a lot was a little pamphlet that Unity has in the past put out, I think you still can get it, called The Golden Key. Anyone remember The Golden Key? Yeah. The Golden Key. Whatever it appears to be out there, it appears out there. It appears to be an issue or a challenge or a problem. It's not out there. And there is only one thing to do in that situation. And that is to be in the Shem, the nature, the name of the One. And you do that by focusing on the nature of God, of the Lord, of love, of beingness, whatever you want to call the source and nurturer and supplier of all that is. Yeah. That's being. And it's wonderful. We are called to be in the name of
whatever beingness works for us to feel oneness. It's just fine. So in that name, Shem is the Hebrew word, and Shem, like every other word in Hebrew, has about 6 possible meanings. And they basically all say in the nature of, in the qualities of, in the characteristic of, in the consciousness of that divine beingness. When I enter into that, then anything that looked like a problem or an issue or a challenge must dissolve. And that, the Course in Miracles tells us, is what Jesus was trying to teach us. How to be that, and therefore be freed from all of the limitations of the material and bureaucratic structures we have created as a culture, as humanity, in order to protect ourselves from what he told us is non-existent. And that's the essence of unity. Being in that one, feeling the joy and the gratitude and the appreciation that allow us to be who we truly are, which is that little cell on the end of the expression of the source of all that is, with all those qualities and all that power that if we knew deep down were ours, we would move mountains with our words and our thoughts and our claims. We wouldn't have to build big machines to do that. We have faith in machines. Let's put faith in the Shem. Yes. So on this fabulous morning, could it be nicer? I don't think it could. That has been celebrated for 2,000 years by Christians, and I documented 5,000 years by the people who call the divine goddess Easter, and an additional 400 or 500 years with the Babylonians and the Chaldeans. We honor the fact, the reality, capital R reality, that which we call divine cannot die, and we are the same as what we call divine. That's what we're here to know and to experience. And spring is such a marvelous time to do that, because everything that looked dead is coming alive. Even the old oak tree outside of Elaine's house is looking alive. The buds are springing on it. Yes, it is, because life is reality. The other side of the veil. Oh, I loved hearing about that. Yes, it's eternal. We are eternally alive. That's truth. And nothing that appears to be out there can ever interfere with what is true in here. And the more we are it, the more fully we experience it out there. And spring is our reminder. And Esther, who is the source of the words estrogen and hysteria and a few other things, reminds us of that when she comes into the valley, wherever we are, or comes up the mountain with her rabbits and the eggs of the new babies, birds that are being brought. So my friend makes this for me. A number of you have commented on it. A friend of mine made this little necklace for me to remind me of what this season is about. And it's bird and flower and egg. And it's just to help us know. We have little reminders and big reminders all over the place. Yes? Use them, please. as we in this room, as we who are associated with unity or in the whole New Thought movement, come more fully into that beingness that is who we truly are, we will see spring and well-being more and more in our world, our shared world. And this is what we want, yes? This is all we really want. We all really want the same thing. We all have different hows. The what's the same. So let's focus on the what. Unity in divinity. Each of us individually and all of us collectively, so that when, as the song says, the old earth dissolves as snow, the new heaven and earth together emerge. And that's what the book of Revelation is about. But we'll talk about that another time. Thank you all.